My name is Brian Wangler, and I am one of the pastors here on the Chicago Central District. And on behalf of your district leadership and a host of pastors and laity out across our great district, I want to say thank you for being willing to let your name run and then step into the position as a member of your local church board. We are so grateful for your willingness to do that. You know, in the book of Acts, as the church during the first 5 chapters was beginning to grow, you come to a place in Acts chapter 6 when it's just too much. There's too much going on for the apostles to deal with. And so they create the first organization, if you will, of leaders. And it says that they appointed people who would take over some responsibilities who were 3 things. One, they were well respected. In Acts chapter 6, it says they were well respected, they were full of the Spirit, and they were full of wisdom. Well, I don't know how full of the Spirit and wisdom you feel today, but believe it or not, that's you. God's going to use you in a powerful way in the coming year to be part of your local church board. Now, being a board member can sometimes be a little bit overwhelming. Our church manual highlights nearly 50 responsibilities of the local church board. What I'm going to do in the next few minutes is narrow all of those responsibilities down to 5 important things that we ask you to remember. If you do these 5 things, the rest of the responsibilities will be fine. All of that will be taken care of, and you will have enjoyed your time on the board, and you will have made a difference. The first thing that we want you to remember is that the local church board, as a local church board member, you are the spiritual leaders of your local church. It's an interesting dynamic how, as goes the spiritual life of leaders, so goes the organization. People won't know what your discipline of quiet time is. They won't know what level you're giving to the local church, or at what level you are volunteering and engaging. They won't always see those things. Sometimes they will, but often they won't. And yet it's going to impact. Never has it been more important for you to have that daily quiet time with God, where He can speak into your spirit things that you will need as a leader that you can then share with other people. So I challenge you to develop maybe some new disciplines, rethink your approach to your own spiritual journey, and allow God to make this a time when you not only are able to lead effectively as a spiritual leader, but that these become incredible days as He births new things in you. So that's the first responsibility of the church board. We are the spiritual leaders of the local church. Secondly, the local church board members work with pastor and staff to identify barriers to church growth and remove them. I used to think that the role of leadership was to grow the church. But Dr. McCain, so eloquently in his book, reminds us several different times that we really can't grow anything. We can have programs, we can have events, but we can't grow the church. What we can do is make sure that the soil is healthy. Make sure that the church is focused on becoming the very best that we can be. We want to reach our full redemptive potential as leaders. And so there will be barriers to that. Sometimes we will just outgrow some things, and we'll need to make some shifts, and there'll be adaptations that need to be made. And in those moments, that's your role, to work with the pastor to remove barriers to growth that will come in the way. Third responsibility of the local church board. As church board members, we are the ambassadors to the local church and community of the mission and vision of our local church. In one sense, of course, as believers, we are ambassadors for the gospel. The Apostle Paul reminds us of that. As members of the Church of the Nazarenes, we really are ambassadors for this incredible movement that is serving us so very, very well. But in your local setting, you will make decisions, and you will talk about direction, and there will be decisions that you make that maybe not everybody will understand, because not everybody can be in the board meeting, right? That wouldn't be practical. And so it's important that as board members, we recognize that we're ambassadors for that. And what an ambassador needs to know to be an ambassador is the ambassador needs to know why. And as you walk through different decisions with your local church board, it's going to be important that you understand why certain decisions are made. And we often agree on the why. We want people to get saved, but once we answer the why, we move into the how. And sometimes there's differences of opinion about the best way to accomplish something. And as a local church board member, you'll be involved in that discussion. And for us to be ambassadors, we have to know the why. We have to be able to articulate the direction that we're headed and why the church board made certain decisions. Now, let me say a word about those moments in a board meeting, because we're all wired differently. If you look around the table at your church board meeting, it's likely that you have different backgrounds. We're wired differently from an emotional standpoint often. We're just different people. And yet God uses this glorious organism that brings different points of view and different opinions to the table to process issues of direction and strategy and decisions that have to be made. That means that there'll be differences of opinion. And we want you to know that part of your responsibility is to be able to voice what you're feeling in your heart, to be able to say what it is that you think about a given issue. And there'll be differences there, but that's okay, because we love each other, we respect each other, and we all agree on the why, right? We're doing what we're doing to honor God and to reach people. And so when there's differences, we can dialogue about that. A couple of thoughts about that issue of, if you're going to be an ambassador, about that issue of dialoguing around differences of opinion, particularly in a meeting. I found it helpful when we're discussing as a board something that may be a little sensitive or difficult, to ask everyone to speak once before anybody speaks twice. Sometimes, and I would be one of those leaders, there are some leaders who are a little stronger, more vocal, and we don't get to hear from everybody. I would encourage you to remind each other when you get into sensitive situations to have everybody speak once before anybody speaks twice. Another important principle with regard to those kinds of meetings is that listening becomes critically important. The longer that I can listen to others before I begin to explain my particular point of view, the better chance I have of understanding what it is that we are actually processing. And when it comes time to discuss differences of opinions, there is no greater friend to that moment than asking questions. Many times in meetings, when I didn't understand how the decision was headed, I would start out by saying, "Help me understand. Help me get a different view of this particular issue or that particular issue." Questions can be disarming, and they're legitimate because you just don't understand. Those are incredible things that I think can be helpful in a church board meeting. Now, once a decision is made, an ambassador represents that decision positively, regardless of how they felt about it personally. There will be decisions that you'll be able to go from the board and go, "This was awesome, and we made it." There'll be other times when there may be a decision made, because there may be some tough ones and hard ones that you won't necessarily personally agree with, but that's what the board decided. And if we're going to have what Dr. McCain refers to as agenda harmony, if we're going to have unity because we love and respect each other, we lay down our personal opinions believing that God is doing something bigger than we know at the given moment, and we will support that decision. So it would be inappropriate for me to leave a board meeting where something was decided I didn't agree with, and I've been in a few of those, and to leave that meeting and go, "Well, here's what the board decided, but I was against it," right? That's not an ambassador. As you slip into this role of ambassador, you're going to be blessed by how God allows you to see some situations differently. But it's a critically important role of a church board member. Number 4, your fourth responsibility is that as church board members, you're responsible for the care of pastor and staff. The role of a minister has never been easy, and it really isn't getting any easier. When you take on the responsibility of minister or pastor, you are a pastor 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. When you're on vacation, you're still a pastor. You're still in that role. And that can be difficult, and that weight can be heavy. And I wouldn't be here having pastored as long as I have if I didn't have church boards from the very beginning. And the first church I pastored was 5 people, so everybody was on the board, who would watch me and pray for me and care for me, who would at times advocate for something to be done physically different for me. Pastors don't walk in and renegotiate their contract every year. We need laity who sometimes will step in and say, "Hey, we need to review how we're caring for our pastor financially and the amount of vacation that he's getting. And we have district recommendations on that, by the way, that can be very helpful. You can contact the district office. But also, I've had laity who have prayed for me enough to say, Pastor, you seem weary, you seem tired, and as a pastor, I have committed that the people around me in that church board are there by divine appointment, and I'm going to listen to them. And so that's part of the responsibility, is caring for pastor and staff and those families, both spiritually and physically. That's number 4. Okay, we talked about the first one. The first one was that we are the spiritual leaders of the local church. And then we talked about how our role was to identify barriers and remove them. And then we talked about how that we're ambassadors for the mission and vision of the local church. And then we talked about caring for the pastoral staff and family. And now the final one is probably the most obvious, and that is that you're a member of the board of directors of your local church. You'll be asked to sign documents. You'll be asked to approve hiring of staff, and you'll be asked to do a lot of those technical things that will be brought before you. It's really, really important that you recognize that. It's important as a member of the board of directors that you are at the board meeting, and if you're not, that you let your pastor know in enough time that he can make sure that there's enough board members for a quorum, and that you take that responsibility. Audits are part of what you will oversee. Those things, while they're number 5, they are very, very important, and we want to make sure that we accomplish them. I pastored 4 churches, and one of them was Elgin Church of the Nazarene. And Ken and Henrietta Johnson are part of, Henrietta is still a part of Elgin Church, and her husband Ken was a longtime board member. And I remember Ken had been leading in the church for decades before I arrived on the scene as a young man. And one Sunday morning he came in, he said, "Hey, I got a letter," and it was from a finance company where decades earlier he had been on the church board when they had bought property. And back in those days, in order for the church board to buy property, the board members would put their own personal credit on the line. You won't be asked to do that, okay? We're in a different system now. But think about that. Many of us are worshiping in churches that there were men and women just like you who used their gifts and graces and made sacrifices as leaders of the local church and church board members that have made the difference, such a great difference over time. Thank you so much for being willing to serve. If you have additional questions, you can contact Dr. McCain or our district office. By the way, I said at the beginning that you are where you are. We believe this by divine appointment. And so let me finish that now. Because of that, because you are where you are by divine appointment, I really do believe that you're going to do much better than you think you might. God is going to use you in a powerful way. God bless you. Have a great year. And again, thank you for serving.